I'm obviously very interested in the area of innovation. It's the sort of the work that I've been doing for the past more than 10 years or so. And I really believe that although we've sort of needed to rethink innovation for quite some time, 2020 has really sort of put the spotlight on us having to sort of hit the reset button on some of our assumptions about innovation. You know, we've had to rethink work life and home life and how we socialize and even just how we stay healthy. And I think, you know, in a work context and obviously a business and innovation context, there are a lot of things that we're having to say, this is how we've done things before, but actually going forward, we might have to sort of do a little bit of a rethink. And I want to challenge you today to really rethink how we think of innovation and how we participate in innovation. And as a way of introduction, because I expressly gave Mabel some very strict instructions not to say too much about me, I wanted to use this opportunity to sort of introduce some information about me and to ask you, what have you assumed about me? Perhaps you got your invite to this session and perhaps you did go and have a look at me on LinkedIn, or maybe you sort of thought, well, let me just see what this is about. And I thought we're going to use Mentimeter. Now, Mentimeter is something we can use on our phones. And if you see on your screen, you can access it two ways, but probably the easiest way is to simply take your mobile phone and to scan that QR code. And that will sort of load up the Mentimeter, and I'm going to get you guys to answer a couple of questions and hopefully have a little bit of an interactive session. What have you assumed about me? You have a little bit of information, but perhaps, you know, you're looking at me, you've heard my accent, you've seen my name and so forth. And so what have you assumed? And so I thought if you would like to answer a couple of questions, have a couple of statements about me, and I want to know which do you think perhaps are not true, so which are false. And you can select as many as you like on the Mentimeter. You simply select the box and then press submit, and I will see your responses. Will be sort of entering live. I can see already 11 people, 13 people. Which statements are false? So I have an African grandmother. I am certified in Lego play. I am German. I live in an HDB flat, and for those people in the region, that is sort of public housing here in Singapore. And I have lived in Singapore for 20 years. Answer, and it seems like the leading contender for the falsehood is that I have lived in Singapore for 20 years. You're saying, no, she's too young to have been in Singapore for 20 years, right? So I'll let a couple more come through, and then I shall reveal which is the correct answer. So we assume things all the time. We assume things about our work, our colleagues, our customers. And of course, it's very convenient and efficient to assume. We don't have to mentally process things too much. You know, in innovation, though, we say assumptions can be quite dangerous because we assume that we can do things the way we've always done them, or these are the sort of rules of the game. So I think we've got plenty of answers there. So let me tell you, and this is a little intro to me. In fact, that 26 folks said that it's not true that I've lived in Singapore for 20 years. What I would love to say today is my 20th anniversary in Singapore. So I arrived here this very day. It was a Friday back in year 2000. I came for 2 years, and well, sort of life has happened. And I still find myself in the region and have loved working. I've worked in Hong Kong as well. But Singapore is home for me. So that one's true, okay? The next one, which you say is false, is that I'm not German, you're saying. And you would be absolutely right. So I'm not German. I have a German name. Mabel almost got the pronunciation right. It's Koch. Got a little bit of a happening there. I'm actually not German, but I am South African. So I have an African grandmother. I have an African mother and father and brothers and sisters. I'm from South Africa, originally from a place called Durban. It's a lovely seaside town, lovely place to grow up. but worked in Johannesburg as well, started out in the advertising industry as a strategist. And I am certified in Lego Play, and I do live in an HDB flat in Singapore. So the only one then that's false is that I'm not German at all. So this is just really to get you guys sort of orientated a bit on using the Menti and the phone. And we'll be using it throughout the session to get you to get us some inputs. While we sort of have the Menti up, what I thought I would also do is ask you to think about some beliefs that you may have with regards to innovation. And I've got a couple of statements here, and I want you to indicate whether you agree or disagree with these statements. So you see there's about 5 or 6 statements there. Left-hand side, strongly disagree. And you just move that sort of slider across. So innovation is hard work. Do you agree or disagree? Innovation requires a serious mood. Technology holds the key to innovation. It takes a new invention to create innovation impact. Products are the preferred innovation output. Emotions have no place in innovation, and innovation should be the job of everyone. So if you guys can go ahead, you should have the question already on your screens. And if you can simply slide those sliders across for me based on your beliefs about innovation. I know this one will take a little bit longer, and there's a bit more work in it for you, but I think it'll be quite interesting to see where everybody sort of lands with regards to your beliefs about innovation. So firstly, that innovation is hard work. You're all sort of a little bit more in the agreement stage, and I think I would certainly agree as well that it requires quite a lot of focus, quite a lot of effort. It's not easy to do. And of course, in a very competitive environment, it becomes even harder and harder to find that new opportunity to create value and to break through. So I kind of would agree with you there. Innovation requires a serious mood. Well, you're on the fence with this one, sort of 2.8 out of 5, which says you're kind of neutral. I would say it requires a bit of both. So definitely there are going to be moments of focus and sort of seriousness, if you like. But it also requires a little bit of a experimental, playful, creative approach as well. And so too much seriousness can certainly undermine it. Technology holds the key to innovation. I think you guys are agreeing a little bit more than you are disagreeing. I would say it's one enabler, and I would say it's not the only. So if I was completing this one, I would have it a little bit more in the disagree camp. It takes a new invention to create innovation impact. You're kind of on the fence again. Actually, it doesn't. It requires us to create new value. So a new idea does not have to be invented by us. We can pluck something from another industry and we can create impact. Products are preferred as an innovation output. That is absolutely not true. So we don't mind experiences, can be brand experiences, customer journeys, all of those. If they create value for customers, those are the kind of outputs that we want, and products just being one. Okay. Emotions have no place in innovation. You strongly agree. Well, this webinar is called Innovate from the Heart. And so I'm pleased that you absolutely disagree with that one. And that innovation is the job of everyone. Strongly agree. Fantastic. I would have loved to see that really at number 5. That is really the sort of belief now. You know, back in the day, innovation was always part of a small group of core people. But now we realize that we need to be looking and we need to be moving faster than ever before. We need more people involved. And so really innovation is the job of everybody everywhere in the organization. Okay, so well done on that. We'll leave the Mentimeter for the moment. What I'd like to do is talk about some innovation assumptions that I would like to sort of put to rest. We've talked a little bit about it in the Mentimeter. It's not just about technology. Technology is one enabler, but there are many avenues for innovation. It's not just about newness. It's about creating new value. Innovation can be tangible, but also intangible. Experiences have just as much value. Innovation doesn't have to be serious. And it's not just the job of that sort of one genius, lone genius toiling away, trying to come up with the next big idea. It needs to be all of us. So these are some assumptions I would like to slay. And I thought I'd bring it back to our current context. And it was quite surprising back in sort of February and March when we started realizing we were in for a rough ride in terms of this pandemic. And of course, the first wave of business disruption was to the airlines and the travel industry. And what was really interesting was how airlines sort of seemed to sort of cling to their T's and C's, their ticketing terms and conditions. And it was really surprising to me that what was quite a extraordinary circumstance required some challenging of rules of the game in the industry. And I thought I'd share sort of two examples to illustrate. The one is from my favorite airline, which is Singapore Airlines. One of the benefits of living in Singapore is that this is your home airline. These were the T's and C's around change of tickets and rebooking fees. And this was as reported in Business Traveller back in March of this year. It's quite a lot of hoops that you need to jump through. Customers traveling from mainland China, Hong Kong, Macau, South Korea, North Italy. We will waive cancellations for tickets issued before March 4th from these places. And you need to, travel between these dates. So it was quite a lot. And I think there was a huge amount of customer frustration around the rules and how to go about it. And as a sort of stark example, as a contrast, EasyJet, which is a low-cost carrier from the UK, this was their T's and C's, and they simply said, we've waived flight change fees for all new and existing bookings. And they didn't have any of the sort of, the fine print that Singapore Airlines had. And so for me, the conventional wisdom, and this is obviously a big thing in the airline industry, this thing about rebooking and cancellation is a huge impact to their sort of profitability and revenue and their managing of their seats. And yet it really required quite a radical rethink quite early in the process. And of course, eventually the likes of Singapore Airlines did change their terms quite significantly. If we think about innovation and how business has created value, the reality is that we've kind of run out of a little bit of value creation steam. The last sort of 40 years ago, we've managed to find, through technology improvements, we've managed to find value creation. We've been able to find extra profitability. We've been going to new markets. We've grown quite nicely and organically or through mergers and acquisitions. But in fact, in the recent years, it's been a struggle for business in order to find that next sort of stream of value creation. And what's interesting is if we look at how we've gone about looking for and what kind of mode do we sort of slip into when we look for that new opportunity, effectively our rational brain has been in charge. For the past 200 years or so, really our success has been a triumph of largely the rational brain. And of course, in the same vein, technology has been touted as the savior to business. And we hear about e-business, we hear about e-commerce, of course, very much on everyone's minds, particularly even this year. But I want to sort of challenge the thinking around sort of this idea of electronic business or electronic commerce and say that the E in business perhaps is E for emotion or even E for empathy. Now, of course, we know the move to digital is going to be very important for everybody. But there's another piece which I feel might have been a little bit forgotten, and that's the emotion piece. And my message today for you is that I think that business is in need of a change of heart, that we need to cultivate more widespread empathy for people, whether it be our employees or our customers or other stakeholders. And that's going to be the secret to discovering sort of new and breakthrough opportunities. And so this is really my sort of proposition today, which is to say, I really believe that we need to be innovating from the heart. This happens to be an advertisement for, I think, a language center talking about the power of words. But I'm using it in a different context, which is to say, first sign, I'm blind, please help. The man didn't get too much sort of donations, which is what he was looking for. The lady helped him, and he got the second sign, which is it's a beautiful day and I can't see it. So I want you to go back to the Mentimeter for me, and I want you to tell me, what is the difference between these two signs? What is the fundamental and key difference? There you go. So why did the reworded sign have the impact? Yeah, it got the impact that the man was wanting. And I simply ask you to add a couple of words here. Visualized, which is interesting. It invoked emotion. It created an emotional bond. It has a feeling. It elicits a response, etc. Reverses the way to express. It's about compassion and touch the heart. So these are great inputs. And I think if you think about really, this is the one I really like, from the audience view. So this one is really sort of the essence of why that sign had so much more impact, is that it was written not from the man's perspective, but rather from the audience perspective. And of course, if you are a sighted person walking around the city and you see a man asking for help, you just simply see another person requiring help. But the sign being written, it's a beautiful day and I can't see it, made the audience realize something about their own sighted world, and obviously that this man is perhaps missing out. And so it's the audience view, and I can see more emotional, positive impact, etc., etc. Right. Those who can see cannot identify with someone who's blind. That's absolutely true. We really find it very difficult to truly understand what that's really like. Now they can identify because of the impact of seeing the beautiful day. Well, that was, I think that's somewhere in the UK. That didn't look like a beautiful day to me. That looked rather dreary, but maybe their standard on what a beautiful day is a little different to us. Okay. What's people's real problem? It's not that we need a new kind of water or a water from a new and rare water source or a purified water. We have plenty of options, but what we need is a water brand to help us to hydrate and to remind us to hydrate. And so I love this little sort of flag that sort of pops up when you set it to the kind of frequency that you want to be drinking. Okay. Another example, this one is from the insurance industry. This is from ING Direct. And what they did is they converted their insurance branch sort of spaces into places that they believed people would want to hang out in. And of course, you know, many of us, going down to our bank or our insurance company is certainly not our idea of fun. It's not a place we want to hang out in. And they said, well, why does it have to look like a bank, or why does it have to look like an insurance company? And so they created this cafe concept, and they even had, drinks served. And of course you could see your insurance consultant and spend time there, and who knows, even sign up for a new policy. So they really challenged conventional wisdom around what is a insurance branch. Here's one from Singapore, from Grab. Grab's a sort of taxi operator. They're a sort of ride-hailing app. And they came up with this interesting trial where they put a convenience store inside their taxis. And so you could pay for snacks, some water, etc. And I think, again, it really sort of positioned itself as an offering around convenience, rather than simply being about getting you from point A to B. The thing that really surprised me about this idea, of course, is that, we're told time and again when we get in a taxi that we're not allowed to eat or drink. And so I thought this was quite a startling idea to really confront what is conventional wisdom in the taxi industry about no eating and drinking inside the cab. So this really being very customer centered. The last example, of course, is one from yourselves. This one came up on my newsfeed. I remember, I think it must have been last year, from Sephora in Europe. And really it's about creating a space where introverts can be themselves. And so to go into a retail space and to indicate whether you'd like to have assistance or maybe you'd like to just shop on your own. And I thought this was a lovely idea. Wouldn't have required too much investment. It's something very simple that you could probably trial in a store or two and see, does this work? And it created quite a lot of noise, I think, in the social space as well. So much so that one of your competitors launched this in February this year. So Innisfree did this similar, almost identical idea talking about whether I need help or I can do things for myself. Just a bit more subtle. If you see, there's a very tiny label on the basket indicating your preference. And so, yeah, quite interesting to see that they sort of took your idea wholesale and copied it for themselves. To be getting beyond the data we have. You know, business has been sort of overwhelmed with information. We have become so data rich to the point that we have sort of forgotten sort of the human side of things. You know, our default setting has kind of left us a little bit blind to the human factor. And so what I'm proposing is that we must close this empathy gap that exists. You know, we have ourselves, who we understand very well and what our objectives are, and then there is our customer or another stakeholder. And we're probably a little less sort of proficient in understanding what they're wanting. And so there sometimes can be this gap that emerges, and we need to close that gap. You know, with the blind man example, the gap was closed with the rewriting of that sign by sort of putting, in a way, putting the man in the other people's shoes and perspective, and being able to sort of then bring them over to sort of what his priority was, or his objective. And so we need to close that gap. And there are many ways in which we can do that. And I'm going to spend a few more minutes talking about some of the sort of principles that we can follow in order to do that. Just want to share one more example from Harley Davidson. What they did is they said, you know, when we call our customers, what we effectively do is we build these walls between them and us. But in fact, we actually do have a huge amount in common with our customers, and that is that we are all passionate about motorcycles. And in fact, we are riders too. Our customers, you know, love motorcycle riding, love the lifestyle it brings. And so by calling them customers, in a way, sort of we're creating a disconnect between ourselves and them. So I'm going to send us again to the Mentimeter in a moment and talk about this empathy skill and ask, are we all sort of equally capable of listening to our hearts? You know, we've heard lots of, you know, there's some, you could say, conventional wisdom that says certain kinds of people maybe are a little bit more adept at this empathy thing, right? Maybe some professions are more empathetic than others. Or perhaps even, you know, some age groups are younger people more empathetic than older people, or even some cultures are more empathetic than one another. So I thought we would do a little quick test. This is an interesting test that comes from this professor, Simon Baron-Cohen, and it's called a mind in the eyes test. And basically what it is, it's a set of eyes. And the question is, can you predict what that person is thinking and feeling? And there are about 40 questions. And of course, I'll just demonstrate maybe one or two for us. Questions in the following order, which is to say, that is your job mostly analytical? So if your job is mostly analytical, and I had a look at the list, Shwen and Mabel sent me a list, you know, for example, I see a Cindy, who's a regional legal and compliance director. I would say probably your job is more analytical. Or Kenneth, who is a treasurer. Or Garrick, who is a global senior indirect tax analyst. Okay, so you guys you'd be definitely more in the logic and analytical realm of your job. And then there are other folks, of which I think we have plenty on this call, who are more in the sort of emotional or creative or conceptual realm. Okay, so which are you? So let's go back to, we'll go back to the Mentimeter for a second. The folks who are more in the analytical realm. Okay, so if you are one of those finance or IT or one of those kind of folks, then this question's for you, and I ask everyone else not to answer. So is this person, what are they thinking and feeling? And there were a couple of options: decisive, playful, aghast, and bored. And let's see. That is a pretty decent response, and I'll show you the correct answer. Whoops. Aha. Well done, people. So these analytical folks seem to be quite empathetic. Most of you actually getting the answer absolutely right. 2/3 of you. The correct answer on that image is that the person is decisive. Okay. Creative, conceptual, maybe people kinds of jobs, you know, obviously all the brand folks and the marketing folks and perhaps even the HR folks, you would sort of put yourselves in this camp. And what is this man thinking and feeling? So we see the responses coming up here. You got it. Okay, so if you ask me, you just pipped the other folks, the analytical folks, 67% getting it right and about 70. So if in anybody who understands statistical significance, that's not statistically significant with the margin of error. I'm pretty sure that says you guys are sort of, you're neck and neck. So whether you are sort of more talented in this area or not, really sort of the message I have for you is that this is something we all can work at. We're able to channel sort of this empathy discipline, if you like. What we need to do is we need to become students of human behavior again. And so we encourage people to get out of the office and to go out there and explore, to see your business, your category with new eyes, to spend time out there with customers. And really this is sort of the core principle around empathy, is really to get exposure out there. I have a couple of points here, which is sort of our last sort of section, which is really to say there's a couple things you can do. So if empathy is such a critical part of innovation and we want to innovate from the heart, then what is it that I can do in order to bring myself closer to that? So I've got 5 points here and I'll just run through those for you. So the first one is really to open yourself up to diverse experiences. So this is really about saying the more diverse experiences you have, the more you realize that everybody's experience is also very different. It puts you in a good position not to assume what is a usual or a typical experience. And so what you want to do is sort of really broaden your horizons so that you don't assume about that. You know, I often believe that being a South African living here in Asia is an advantage for me because I don't assume a lot about how things work or what people want. I always have to sort of go and find out a little bit more. And always, you know, not believe that my view is the dominant view. And so opening ourselves up is really is something we all can do, and it's fairly accessible. You know, even though we're all on tight travel restrictions, there's so much. Even, you know, I was thinking I've been here 20 years in Singapore, but there's so much of this island that I've probably just overlooked. And so, you know, go and explore and learn anew. Point number 2 is to really sort of keep ourselves open. And so to see what is happening immediately in your environment and to stay open to observation. And of course, in a marketing sense or innovation sense, we say it is preferable to observe rather than to ask questions. You know, in a marketing research sense, we always ask questions. We want to understand people's preferences, their motivations. This is an example from a project that I did in Asia, where we were trying to understand people's dairy purchases. And what we did was we actually sort of camped out in the dairy aisle. We had some cameras with approval of the supermarket. And we also had some researchers outside the supermarket, so that when people had purchased their dairy milk or whatever it was, we could then sort of intercept them as they left and ask them what they'd purchased. What was so interesting for us is that people had sort of purchased a brand of milk literally moments before and then walked out the store. And when we asked them about the brand that they purchased, it was only when they sort of opened up the bag and sort of took the milk out, they realized actually that wasn't what they thought they'd purchased. And so even in those few moments from aisle to out the supermarket, they'd forgotten what they'd actually purchased on that particular occasion. Now, this is an interesting other insight, which is this lady is sort of peering into the shelf. And what is she actually doing? Well, what she's really trying to do is she's trying to find the milk with the longest expiry date. And so she's sort of digging into the back of the fridge for those further out expiry dates because she clearly wants to have the freshest milk for as long as possible. And so these kind of observations, and of course, when you talk to somebody, they would never tell you that. But when you see it with your own eyes and spend time there, you can certainly learn something. Step into the world of your customer or your user. This guy, his name's Drew Manning. He's a personal trainer. And what he did is he did something extremely radical, and I perhaps would not be suggesting that you do anything quite as radical as this. He gained 30 kilograms in 6 months, and then he lost it. And so what he was trying to do was he was really trying to understand the psyche of his customer. You know, he's in the fitness business, and he said, I've been a fit guy my whole life. I really don't know what it's like to be the guy in the middle. And it was only by putting on those 30 kilograms that he said he really understood the emotional struggles of his clients. And he was able to address their programs and sort of adjust them to be much more dealing with the psychological impact of being unfit and being overweight. Number 4 is use your own products. Of course, you guys, LVMH group, you've got the most amazing products right across your different maisons. So of course you want to use your own products, but sometimes it's not so obvious. This is for Philips, and this is a team that's having a team lunch, and they're using all of their kitchen appliances. And of course, by using these products together, even the team is understanding some of the challenges of how maybe products work well together or don't work together. And so identify some potential opportunities to innovate. Okay. You know, you have to stop being a sort of product designer or user experience person and actually just be a customer yourself and sort of see what it is the customer is experiencing. The 5th point around how we can make empathy a discipline. This is from Burton. They're in the snowboarding business. And theirs was a real interesting one about saying you need to hire your customers where you can. Or bring them on board in some capacity, maybe not full-time, but certainly are there opportunities part-time. The founder of Burton, this Jake Burton Carpenter, said that they started hiring high school students on a part-time basis. These were people who lived and breathed snowboarding, and of course some went on to do great things. And through them, the company learned a lot about the sport and the market and much more than they knew was possible. And of course, it turned out to be quite a brilliant move because they really understood the market quite differently than they, as employees of Burton, did. So hire your customers where you can. So those are the 5, I think many of which are very accessible to all of us. You don't need to be in an official marketing or innovation capacity to be able to open yourself up to diverse experiences or open to observation. Some of them a little bit more radical, but you don't have to be quite as radical in terms of trying to step into the world of your user. So I thought what I would do now is sort of our last question as we sort of come to the end of the sharing is to ask you to think about what you could do from tomorrow. What could you do differently? And we'll go back to the mentee meeting. I've got 2 questions for you. So if you were trying to close that empathy gap between yourself and the people that you serve, whether they be clients and customers or even another group within the organization, what is something that you're going to stop doing? And then what is something that you could start doing? So for this is you personally, what could you sort of take on board from tomorrow? So I'm going to stop. So what is it that you think that you do today that maybe you need to stop doing? So this is quite a tricky one. Something that might be getting in the way of you innovating from the heart or closing that empathy gap. Who said what they're going to stop doing? So let's have a look. Stop making assumptions and think everything that you know is correct. Speak less and listen more. I love that one. Less judgment. Not overthinking. I love that. We always say, don't have a meeting with yourself. Start listening more. Stop putting assumptions on our clients. Don't stay too long in the office. Get out of the office and go and explore. I love that one. Active listening. I'm going to change the message on my board. Well done. Yes, those little micro actions can be quite powerful. Think before you act and so forth. So very good. lovely sharing, stop your bias, etc. Okay, so something that maybe is not too difficult to do, something you could possibly even start this very week. People, how they're feeling. Connect on a personal level, observe and listen, reach out, being open, yeah, to listen to that alternative perspective. Open your heart, ask more, and don't assume so much, yeah. Put yourself in other people's shoes and so forth. You are directly customer facing, but it really can apply to everyone, because we all ultimately serve a stakeholder, whether it be an internal audience or an external audience. So ask more, always come from a place of positivity. I love that one. Be more mindful of the customer and so forth. So very good sharing. Thank you for that, guys. Leave you with this sort of final thought, which is about this idea that really the results could be quite surprising when you use your heart as much as your head. And I really want to challenge the conventional wisdom about how innovation happens, that it's not just the lone genius, that it's not just about technology, but it can be about all of us working together, and that we are using our hearts as much as our head. And I really encourage you to innovate from the heart. With me, or you could drop me an email as well, angela@invitroinnovation.com. So do keep in touch, and who knows, we might see each other in the flesh someday. An example or two to demonstrate sort of what happens when we use our hearts as much as our heads. So this idea of sort of empathizing, of really connecting and making us sort of stand in the shoes of someone else, really being the powerful, what I believe is a powerful enabler to innovation. I want to share a couple of examples within the sort of the marketing and business and innovation world. I've got 4 examples I just want to share.